and they're going to eat something. I'm like, so I'm just barking orders at the kids. And I'm like, kids, go do this, go do that, go clean the dishes, go whatever. I just make up stuff just to get them all to do stuff. And this is what's happening. When I'm fasting in a very selfish way because the fast itself is selfish. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get God to give me some favor, right? That's selfish. I'm trying to manipulate God as if he's some voodoo doll that I can just sort of turn on to my whims. And so I'm saying, I'm fasting, God, pay attention to me. And then secondly, I'm fasting so everybody else should do what I say. Everybody else should just go ahead and go with me because it's just today. Tomorrow I'll be normal again, but today I can be a grouch because I'm feeling it. That's what they're doing. And God says, I don't think so. Look at verse 5. God says, is this the kind of fast I've chosen? Only a day for a man to humble himself? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed and for lying on sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast? A day acceptable to the Lord? See, God says real fasting is not what you're doing. Real fasting is not just one day. Think about this. Back in the day, what was happening is that the only people who were wealthy enough to do a fast are the people who didn't have jobs. They were the people who didn't have to work with their hands all day. They're the people who didn't have to be out in the fields. They're the people who were wealthy enough to do a fast. And all their workers and their servants and their slaves were the people that were doing the jobs for this other guy. And so he's fasting, they're working. And so imagine this. One day, he's fasting. The next day, he's not fasting anymore. But the next day, they're still slaves. See, I know if I give up food, that doesn't change the quantity in my fridge. If I go a whole day without eating anything, my fridge still has the food. That means tomorrow I can double down. Tomorrow, I can get it all taken care of. Today is all right. It's just a brief span of time. I'm not giving up food. I'm delaying food. God says that's not what a fast is. It's not a day for being humble. Because you might give it up for a day, but tomorrow your workers are still oppressed. Keep going. Verse 6, is not this the kind of fasting I've chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe him and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? See, real fasting has two aspects to it. If you're taking notes, jot these things down. Real fasting has two aspects to it. Number one, it has the aspect of working for lasting justice. That's what verse 6 is all about. God says in verse 6, pay attention to the verbs here. The first verb is loose, untie, then set free, and then break. And there's a progression going on here. It's a parallel progression. In the original languages, the words could possibly be translated a little bit different. In the original Hebrew, they could possibly be translated a little different. And this is the way some other translators have chosen to translate the same four verbs. The first verb is open. So open the bonds. Instead of loose the chains, open the bonds of injustice. And then the second one is loose, release or loosen the cords of the yoke. Then the third one is not just set free, but send. Send out. And then the last one is break. Here's the progression. God says, I want you to take the things that keep people in injustice, and I want you to open them so they have the opportunity to be free. And I want you to take the yoke, the thing that you use to capture other people into your way of doing things. The yoke being the slavery kind of thing. It's a symbolism of slavery. Yoke is what you would put on two oxen as they're pulling a plow. And so yoke used for human beings means you're degrading humans as if they're animals. And so God says, first, open the chains, open the bonds that hold people oppressively. For some, that may actually be let people out of jail who are imprisoned unjustly. But then the yoke thing, God says, loosen that, expand that so that people can get out, so they're not trapped in it. And then he comes back to this other one and he says, okay, let's go back a little bit. You didn't just open the bonds so that the slaves could go free. What you need to do is you need to kick them out. You need to send them out. And then don't just loosen the yoke, break it. Do you see how those verbs go? God says, okay, it's one thing to let people free. It's another thing to make sure they can't get enslaved again. God says, I want you to be working for lasting justice in this world. Okay, so in most cases, I'm a Republican. And then I read what the Bible tells me about how to take care of other people. And it really messes me up. Because I like to talk about responsibility. But God doesn't say anything here about responsibility except for your responsibility to make sure justice happens for others. And if you go further, the second thing he says here, the first one was work for lasting justice. The second thing is provide immediate aid. Provide immediate aid. He says in verse 7 that the fast he wants is to share your food with the hungry. The literal word behind the word share there is to divide. God says divide your bread in the original language. He says divide your bread. Take your bread, break it in half, give some of it away. That's the kind of fast he's asking for. Provide immediate aid to the hungry. And notice there's no comment on whether or not the hungry deserves to be fed. He just says, share your food with the hungry. Provide the poor wanderer with shelter. Some translations actually say this. The literal words in the Hebrew say this. It says, to bring the wandering and afflicted into the house. And some commentators have said that what that really means is bring them into your house. And so the NIV is taking one direction by saying give them shelter, and that's not a bad direction to take, but the ambiguity of the original language is lost. The original language just simply says get them into a house. And then when you see the naked, this is another thing in the original language that just astounds me. It says in the original Hebrew, it says when you see someone who's naked, cover them. And do not conceal yourself. In the NIV it says, don't turn away from your flesh and blood. Turn away is that conceal. Don't hide yourself from them. I know you do this because I do it too. You see the homeless guy standing on the corner, but you see him a mile ahead, and so you roll up your window in your car so that you can't hear him when you get there. And then when you do get there, you keep your eyes fixed straight ahead, and you don't want to make eye contact because he might come over. And you can